hi, and welcome to Thumbing Through Yesterday, the podcast where we take our favorite books off the shelf, dust them off, and remind ourselves why it is we love them. My name's Tom Galley. Joining me today, we've got Tony Pasculi.
Thanks for having me again.
Always a pleasure. And today we're picking one of my favorites, The Madness Season by C.S.Friedman.
So, as always, the usual question, why? Why is this one of your favorites?
So, this is a multi-pronged answer. There's no simple answer to this one. The Madness Season is the first C.S. Friedman novel I discovered, which is in part why it holds that honorific of favorite. Once I read this, there was nothing that would do except that I go out and get my hands on everything I possibly could that C.S. Friedman had written. At the time, C.S. Friedman was a little bit of a mystery. Didn't know if it was a he or a she, but I really enjoyed much about the Madness Season and wanted to read more. And every new book I picked up, contributed to that. C.S. Friedman likes to write series, though. So when it comes to looking for a standalone novel to represent, this was really the only choice I had.
Gotcha.
So
I noticed that. There's several trilogies in her.
Yeah, I didn't want to tease you at the start of a trilogy that you would feel maybe compelled to buy into. But yeah, so I mean, in terms of my metric, I probably haven't read this more than a handful of times, 3, maybe 4 times. But that all counts. Of the C.S. Friedman books I have read each of them 3 or 4 times. So as a composite author, or the composite works of the author, I've read her works over and over again, collectively.
So this is, and from what I gather, this is considered not one of her better books. Her writing is considered to get stronger later, especially in her series and her trilogies.
I would agree with that.
But that aside, what is it about this book specifically that appeals to you beyond it's notable for the author? What did you enjoy about this book? I have a guess.
It has nothing to do with broken characters. Well, there's some broken characters. You're going to love my next selection. But one of the things, and again, this is a multi-part answer. One of the things that I like about this book, and one of the things that made me want to read more C.S. Friedman, is the fact that she came up with aliens.
They're pretty good aliens.
Yeah. Often in sci-fi, an alien, and Star Trek. You maintain that Star Trek's not science fiction. I don't know that I disagree with that, but you stick a prosthesis on the forehead, you've got an alien who happens to act just like a human would, with maybe a quirk, right? And here we've got multiple alien species, and we really get to plumb the depths of a couple of them. And the tier, it's a hive mind that actually functions for the most part like a hive mind. You get into the Mara, you have this weird thing, and no two Mara are alike, but what they all have in common is that their priorities have nothing in common with what we think priorities would be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I wasn't completely on board with that. There's a quote that I highlighted saying, there is no wrong or right for us any more than there is love, hate, or any sense of species altruism. All those are body things, chemical processes. And that is weird to me that you can reduce morality to a chemical. I mean, depending on your definition of how the mind works, ultimately everything is a chemical process. But it seems like just because you're disembodied doesn't mean you can't have a sense of right and wrong. Yeah. Yeah,
and maybe the sense of right and wrong simply is not something that you could conceptualize, from our perspective. I don't know. You talk about this not being one of her strongest novels, and I agree this is not one of her strongest novels, but it's not. This is like her 5th or 6th novel at this point. So some of the things she's written before this are stronger. And one of the things I think she doesn't quite stick to her guns with is that emotion is all body stuff. And I mean, if you really want to justify this, I mean, the Mara talk about the fact that pre-contact with the Sodar, I think was the pink tentacle aliens that we only get hints about.
Yeah.
They had no idea that matter existed.
Yeah.
And somehow or another, the Sodar discovered that they existed, discovered a way to interact with them, and taught them a new way of interacting. And it's been so long that they've done that, they have forgotten what it is like to actually be disembodied. They can no longer think of themselves without having matter to express themselves. So I'm wondering if maybe some of that body stuff is starting to rub off. After a couple of millennia of being embodied, maybe it's starting to stick.
I think that certainly the Mara that we meet are pretty emotional, and I think that a lot of that, and I'm okay with this, even if the author doesn't make this distinction, that the Mara believe that they are beyond emotion when they actually are not. But in contrast to other embodied species who are much more emotional, they can assume that they have no emotion, but in fact they do. It's just not at the same level. It's just lower down on the Richter scale or whatever of emotion. So,
well, and the female, well, I shouldn't call her female, but the Mara with whom we have the most interaction, the one that pairs up with Datron. Yeah. She justifies her attachment to him with this idea of she's investing in her, what was the name, Krita?
Yeah.
Something along those lines. But he's becoming a guardian, a custodian of her memories because her memory span is only about 500 years.
Yeah.
And she justifies her actions by saying, I'm defending that investment.
Yeah.
At times when I'm not sure I buy, that's legit.
Yeah. That sounds like an emotion to me. So okay, here's a question for you. If you were to divide the book in half, and then which half of the book do you prefer? The first half or the second half? This is a weird question.
That is an interesting question. I can kind of see where you're going with this. The first half is a lot more cerebral. We spend a lot more time developing an understanding of the players involved. The second half is a lot more things happening. There's space travel, there's revolution, there's sentient puma things, which are just cool. The Hrass. I love the Hrass. Which one do I prefer? I had to tear it in half and only read half of it. I don't know how to answer that one. I'm not going to answer that one. I can't answer that one.
Yeah, okay.
But what about you?
Clearly I have a distinct preference here. The first half of the book, as you say, is very cerebral. One of the things that was kind of driving me nuts is that that this author Friedman is that things are abstract and not grounded in reality. It's a lot of the main character thinking about things, angsting about things, remembering things, and not a lot of, as you say, doing things. So I couldn't even tell you a specific incident that happens in the first half of the book. The first half of the book is a big black void to me. The second half of the book is like, now we have a novel. Now things are happening. And that's about the time when Datron and I want to say Kiri, if that's her name, the Mara.
I think you're right. I think it's Kiri.
Meet up for the first time, and we get the sense that a revolution's going to happen. They get the encounter with the bad priest, and just things really take off from there. Yeah. So the second half of the book I quite enjoyed, and the first half of the book was a struggle for me. Yeah.
The idea of the time fugue is sort of a convenience for her because it lets she's got a reason to enforce the fact that all these flashbacks are coming along. And I think, there's a self-referential comedy there when he's first interrogated by the Tyr, and, he's talking about, my body temperature is a little bit lower than normal. And the Tyr says, the human mind would not function well under such conditions. And Datron says, it doesn't.
Yeah. Yes. The comedy of understatement. Oh, shoot. I was going to say the Tyr are interesting. I don't know how I got this impression, but somehow very early on, I got the impression that because the Tyr had subjugated people of Earth, and they had obviously subjugated a number of other alien species, and because they have different components of the Tyr are named different things, I thought that the Tyr were a hive mind imposed upon multiple distinct species, and not an individual species with multiple distinct worker types like ants. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I was very confused for a long time.
So
that's not necessarily on the author. It just might be my sloppy reading.
You have the Han Tyr, which would, I guess, be the drones.
Yeah.
The Ryat Tyr are just the Ryat, and then the Kol Tyr.
Yes.
But the Ryat grow to become Kol. We don't know, and they don't tell us if the Han grow to become Ryat. I get the feeling that they don't. I think the Han are stuck being Han. But
yeah, I think so. Yeah, and the Ryot are the ones that go insane.
The unstable
hence
ones.
The title of the book. Yeah.
I thought that was a really fascinating concept too. The fact that you've got these components of a hive mind that during a certain season and with no foreknowledge suddenly find themselves individuals.
Yes.
And they've had absolutely no experience whatsoever being individuals. And we're given to understand from the human experiments, their minds are potentially much better minds than a human mind, but they've never had to use them before. So they're idiot children with fantastic potential intellect. And consequently, there's just no predicting what they will do.
And very poor emotional control because they have no experience being individuals. So they're like children. So they lash out and vaporize people. Pretty dangerous.
But that touches on one of the things that I don't think I had picked up on this before, but on this read through I did, was this really is, at least on if you're going to put down planks that this book is built upon, memory.
Yes.
Because all of the key players, the tier is handicapped by, or the Ryot in particular, handicapped because they don't have any individual memory.
Yes.
The tier itself is handicapped because it has memory, but it has no ability to learn, not a meaningful sense of abstraction. Datron is handicapped by his memories because they overwhelm him at times and he's powerless against them. Kiri is worried because she's losing memories, and we see evidence that with the Mara, if they lose enough memories, they actually become mortal.
Yeah, that was fascinating. They forget that they're immortal and therefore they can die. Yeah. Although I want to point out that Datron's memory is actually a positive in a sense also, because he's one of the few people that remember Earth before subjugation.
Yep.
I think he's the only living human that remembers Earth before subjugation, right? Unless there's some still on Earth like him.
He suspects, and we're never given a straight answer on this, he suspects there are others of his kind that are still in hiding on Earth. And that's part of why he's so terrified about the tier capturing him, is now that if the tier discovers what he is, then it can root out the others. We're not given a straight answer on his lifetime either. It's about 1,000 years, I think. He admitted to 500 to the tier, who had only been on Earth for 400 years, but I get the feeling that he was selling himself short there from other stuff that he let slip here and there.
I think there's several references to his father being alive for the burning of the library at Alexandria, which was BC. Somewhere between 500 and 2,000 years old. Yeah. Old. He's old.
Yes, but by our stretch of imagination anyway,
Yeah. It's interesting. So one of the things, there's a couple things I found unsatisfying in terms of the, this is nitpicking, because it's not necessary to enjoy the book to have a valid scientific explanation for these things. But this book is supposed to be grounded in science, and they talked about, and there's one point Datron is very, very relieved when they put him in a PET scan, and he discovers that there actually is a physiological explanation for what he's doing. And he is relieved that it is actually science and not magic, so that he is a human being with special abilities and not a creature of the night, which I think sometimes plagues his thoughts.
Well, and that there's two fun things about that. I mean, one, I love the fact there's a chapter section. This one sentence basically says, the PET scanner wasn't designed for wolves, right? That's another one of those just little understatement humor moments. You have to pause and have a laugh while you're reading. But the other thing is, he made, at some point in the past, he made a conscious decision to disremember what he really was. He made a conscious decision to ignore or rewrite or tune out memories that had him as anything other than human with a blood disorder.
He's pretty angsty about that. He's very distressed about the idea that he might not be human, and he frets about it a lot. To the point of pearl clutching, from my point of view. It's like, in that way, okay, and this is where I figured, you probably love this guy because he reminded very much of Thomas Covenant. It's like, dude, you're an immortal shapeshifter. Get on board. Okay. Enjoy this. And he's like, no, it's terrible. What if I'm not a human being? It's like, who cares?
He's very angsty about it. I don't think he has the depth of self-loathing that Covenant has.
He does not.
But yeah, there's some fragmentation going on there. And I love the fact that when he's pushed to become a flying creature, he doesn't want to become a bat just because of the vampire mythos.
All right. So, which brings me back to, I don't think he can become a flying creature.
Now, I actually have that written down as a flaw here, my own self. But let's hear your justification.
My justification is the heaviest bird that exists is 40 pounds. Heaviest flying bird. I mean, ostriches obviously get larger, but they don't fly. Yeah.
It's limited to, I thought the California condor was notably larger than that. But
is it?
I don't know. I thought it was, but
I
don't think there are any flying birds that come in the 150 to 200 pound range.
There are not.
They do say that he has to maintain roughly equivalent mass.
Yes.
Right. So, I mean, for, if we go with a slight build, if he's a 150 pound man, right, that's a decent sized wolf.
As plausible as a wolf. It is.
That's a large bobcat. It's pretty small for a panther.
Yeah.
He would make a, ridiculously small whale. But yeah, so a 150 pound bat is an interesting mental image.
So I buy him as a gliding creature, but I don't buy him as a taking off under my own power with wings creature.
Well, we're given he changes into an Archaeopteryx, if I'm wrapping my tongue around that correctly.
Yeah.
So, I mean, we've got the whole, dinosaur open to us well. So he could be, what was the big...
Pteranodon or pterodactyl?
Pterodactyl, yeah. Now they're called pteranodons, right?
Yeah. I think they might be slightly different. I'm not sure. And there's some debate over whether they actually flew or not, or whether they just sort of glided as well. I don't know. Yeah.
I don't know either, but we'll go with the Jurassic Park version and have them flying.
Have them flying,
But yeah, that's a stretch.
The other thing is, and this is sort of addressed, but not to my satisfaction, is that there has got to be a massive amount of energy in doing a transformation like that, of reassembling literally every molecule in your body, because they're rewriting their DNA, right?
Mm-hmm.
They're completely reshaping everything. And that's just, if you think about how much work that is, and they do talk about, like the Mara talks about, I need a certain amount of energy for the change, but she's talking about thimblefuls of energy. And I'm talking, it's not, Michael Phelps couldn't eat enough in a day to support this kind of metabolism. Yeah. So
there's got to be, so at some point we have to enter into the fiction side of science fiction.
Yeah.
But she's also inconsistent with that throughout the novel. And another aspect of it, the fever. Right. And this is something that bothered me the first time I read it, and it's continued to bother me every time I reread it. So if he's exposed to daylight, his body undergoes this transformation that makes it much more human. His pulse accelerates to a human pulse, his body temperature raises to a body temperature. And if he gets stuck in that, he's stuck with a more lifespan. At least he believes so. And sometimes it comes with just a little bit of sunlight and it's instantly painful.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's a gradual translation. If you do it at dawn, it doesn't hurt. But once you're locked in by the fever, you have to consume blood in order to regain your shape-changing abilities. And I think there are at least twice in the book, and maybe a third time is arguable, in which, while escaping desperately from humanity, he gets caught in the sun, he's forced to hide out the day, and then uses his shapeshifter ability after the sun goes down. Shame on you, C.S.
Yeah, I thought, I thought she was being pretty coy with the whole vampire werewolf thing. I mean, along with his accent, she never uses any of those words. I think werewolf comes up like in the last quarter of the book, tangentially, but there's a lot of talk about him being the last of his kind, or the only one of his kind, or his special abilities, or what if they find out about me, or am I human, without actually just coming out and saying I'm a shapeshifter. Yeah.
Yep.
It's this dancing around, and I don't know why.
Yeah.
It needs to be danced around.
And they dance around it with a nod and a wink, right? Because there are several times he makes references himself, and even the scientists in the Dome City make a couple of sideways references that clearly the fill in the blank is vampire.
Yes.
Right. But the only time they actually use the word, it might not be the only time, but certainly the first time they used the word vampire is after he met one of the other Mara
Yeah.
Who's slowly draining this human to death. And he's like,
And calls him a vampire.
I've never met a
that was
vampire
interesting.
before. Yeah.
Along those lines, a little incident I enjoyed is when he goes, this is sometime back in, I don't know, I want to say the Victorian era. He goes to a doctor to have his blood condition treated. And this doctor has worked with other people who have a similar blood condition. And the doctor also doesn't come out and say vampires and werewolves, but clearly that's what the doctor is thinking. And now for his own protection, he must be placed in protective custody because, he'll feed on human beings if he's left to his own devices. And he has to break out of there and escape. It was a wonderful little interlude. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I found that, in as much as anything in this book could be completely believable, I found that completely believable. A man of learning in that era is approached by this person. What can it be but a psychological condition, right? Or even if it is a physical condition, clearly you don't have the psychological strength to resist these learned urges. So, yep, we're just going to throw you in a padded cell.
Yeah.
Like it or not.
Yeah. But I like the fact that there were enough of them running around the world at that time that this physician had encountered multiple of them.
Well,
so
that's certainly one interpretation, right? He might have just encountered other people that liked to drink blood.
I guess that's a possibility.
That had heard that knew of the mythos of the vampire and convinced themselves that they were vampires, who were in fact mentally ill and dangerous and attacked people. And that could be why his prejudice was there, that this person had to be restrained.
Interesting.
That's how I chose to take it.
Interesting. I took it the other way, that he had just encountered multiple vampires and werewolves, and he just knew that despite their protestations, that they couldn't refrain from revealing their true nature when the time was right, when they were hungry and had to feed, and therefore they had to be restrained because they would inevitably break their promises. Yeah. So, yeah, okay. But legitimate, sure.
Yeah, possibly so. Yep. Luck really favors this guy. I tell you.
Yeah.
Trapped on the Tyr starship, slowly starving to death, and his body does this instinctive thing that somehow allows him to shapeshift and open the door that he doesn't know how to open, and finds his way back to the animal cage, which, that he made a point of trying to remember how the ship was laid out. So I get that he could have done that.
I was okay with that. The part where the luck got in my way was the end game. So now we're in the second half of the book and we're rocketing along, actually the last quarter of the book. And it's like all the pieces are falling into place, and there's a rebel alliance is forming, and scientists are sciencing, and they have a plan, and they're going to send him they're going to take Datron, and they're going to have him shapeshift into a Ryot body so he can join with the Tyr and learn something about their weakness and exploit it. And then that will be the signal for the start of the revolution. And but there's no really clear plan of how that's going to happen. And it's like they send him over this is, I don't know, maybe you disagree. They send him over this threshold where it's like, now we can no longer communicate with this guy. He's over there. He's one of them. We're not going to get any information back from him. So either he's going to do something that we will see as a recognizable signal and we can act on it, or there will be an effect. But it's just really not clear to me what that plan is.
It's not so much a plan. It's 4/16 of a plan, maybe, which would be a quarter. But yeah. She does a pretty good job of them not having a choice, right? Because we've set up the fact that the travel is based on these long ships, and these long ships are basically, at one point we're told they're non-divertible, and yet they do on occasion get diverted, right, to the your home world. But they're on these huge loops, and they only come by every once in a while, and it's going to be a while before they get another stab at this thing.
Yeah.
So, there's a time pressure there, which is I think legitimate, or at least believable.
Also a really lovely moral dilemma there, in that the people who are working on this, who are instigating the revolution, are stuck in these domes on a hostile planet. And if they succeed in wiping out the Tyr, they have no way to get off this planet and no way to be resupplied. So they're sealing their fate if they go through with this. They decide to go through with it anyway for the benefit of the human race.
Well, you talk about the moral dilemma. I love the fact that was not evident to all of them.
Yes.
And when the little cadre of people for whom it was evident realized it wasn't evident for everybody, they chose to not tell everybody. They chose to take that on themselves. But they're, Datron, as far as any of them know, has been condemned to death, right? Because he's been transformed into an alien without a way to transform himself back. He's been put on a long ship that, if everything goes well, will not be coming back. I mean, he signs up for a one-way trip.
Yeah.
And they all sign up for a one-way trip along with him.
Yeah. So then the other issue that I had with that is, and this is just stated and not really argued effectively, what that means in plain English is that there is no magic kill. Even if there is a seed of consciousness, a great mother, or a cloud of knowing, or something like that. They're talking about if the Gestalt consciousness is embodied in something, that killing that Gestalt consciousness wouldn't wipe out the Tyr, because they have independent brains that we know from the Ryat that they can function independently. But that was not sufficient for me. The parts will go on, but the society, I think, would collapse if they all turned into individuals. The Ryat have experience becoming individuals, but you know that they behave badly. And no one else has any experience being an individual at all. They have no memory. They haven't used those parts, literally haven't used those parts of their brain. Those parts of their brain are undeveloped. So I would think that if you could wipe out the central governing intelligence, if it existed, which it's not really clear that it does, but if it did, that would be a clean kill. That it would be very much like not as definitive as killing the Bugger Queen in Ender's Game, because the soldiers wouldn't die, but they'd be stupid.
Yeah, but I think, you'd have a whole bunch of Riot all of a sudden, effectively, right? A whole bunch of things running around that are individuals with no idea of how to be individuals. And certainly the mortality rate from that would be staggering between the predation by the Hrass and the humans and any other subjugated races. And conflicts between the stupid Tyr themselves, I shouldn't say stupid, but the ignorant Tyrs themselves. But certainly there would be survivors. And certainly the survivors would ultimately start to bond and develop society. And I mean, it would be a hard reset on the level of, asteroid hits the Earth, 200 Neanderthals survive, and we have to start rebuilding. That level of reset. But I don't think it would be extinction. And I think what would emerge, of course, is you would have a very different Tyr.
I would say if you're a human being that's completely subjugated by an alien race, if you can knock them down to that level of reboot, that's effectively a clean kill.
Yeah. Well, in effect, especially since none of you have the recipe for faster than light travel anymore.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, even if it's not a hard kill, so what? You're not going to see them again in many lifetimes.
Exactly. Yeah. So to me, that's a significant objection that just kind of gets brought up and dismissed in a couple of lines. And I'm like, no. We need to spend more time with this, because I'm not buying that at all. And then it turns out to be, I think because Friedman knows where this is going, and it turns out to be very confusing, that idea of whether there is a great mother or cloud of knowing is not sort of, it's weird. I don't know if I want to give it away, but but it's weird. It's not, there's not like a queen. Well, there is kind of like a queen.
It is a little abstract. And one of this isn't like, the people who are listening to this presumably have read the book. I don't worry too much about spoilers, but whatever that nexus is, right? It goes from being Tyr, and then it absorbs all of Datron. Yeah. And then, Datron's able to stop himself physically from being consumed by shape-shifting to an earlier stage of riotness. Yeah. But it's an instantaneous transformation in that hive entity, that suddenly it becomes, completely understandable and completely motivated by the same things that motivate us. And, it's trying to manipulate him into joining it through love and belonging and acceptance and all these things that, 30 seconds ago were utterly alien to it. I mean, it absorbs all of his mind and his experiences. Okay, that's fine. But it adapts to them so instantly. And that bothers me a little bit.
Yeah, it seems like a hive mind would not waste its time on persuasion techniques at all. It was just like, you're one of us or you're not. If you're one of us, you're one of us. And if you're not, we destroy you. That's how it treats its other, members. they say this multiple times. If anything seems to be dysfunctional, they don't even waste time trying to diagnose the problem. They just wipe it out.
Yep.
Yeah,
Just
they
drop it
vaporize
dead in its tracks.
because there's plenty of them. Individuals are like, they're like cells. We have no regard for the individual cells of our body.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
which also shows the complete lack of imagination in the tier at that point, anyway.
yeah.
I did love the fact that Frederick became the new, suddenly it's no longer the Han tier anymore. Now it's the Han Frederick.
Yes.
It's a completely new race with a completely new set of motivations that he helped birth.
Yeah.
And certainly the first time through, I never saw that coming. When they first give Frederick his name,
yeah.
When the strange partnership first forms between Datron and Frederick, and then they're thrown back together. Although Frederick never knows they're thrown back together.
Yeah.
Even at that point, I didn't see it coming. And reading it through this time, I was looking for it. It's like, is she telegraphing this? Is there something I should have picked? And there isn't.
Nope.
That was smooth. That was flawless.
One of the things I want to say, this is a little bit tangential to the book as a book, but I was getting stuck in some places, so I picked it up on Audible also, and was listening to it in my car so I could get some extra reading time in while I was driving. And I forget who reads this book, but they read it very, very well. One of the things I really enjoyed is their pronunciations of all the alien names. They're not just like Riot and Tyr, but the Rayats and the Hras and the Tyr. It's rolling all the R's, and it's just wonderful. It's read very, very well.
I might have to look that up just for that experience. We were talking about the domes earlier. One of the fun yet tragic scenes in there is when they get the new Earther, the new scientist from Earth.
Oh yeah.
And they have to break it down. They have to say, you've got to understand, when the Tyr showed up, we were on the verge of understanding chemically how the brain worked and being able to induce behaviors and fix problems in the brain. We weren't quite there, but we were so close. It was coming. It was possible. We had to destroy all that, and we can never relearn it. And he's like, the hell you say?
Yeah.
I'm a scientist. I must have knowledge. This is wrong. But that moment when, he gets away from the crowd and they don't realize what he's gone to do. And oh my God, he went to talk to Frederick.
Yeah.
And they all burst into the room and he's just finished telling them. I can just see him turning with this look of triumph. Like, your little brother who ran to mom and told on you. And now you're helpless. You can't do anything. And Frederick kills him. He pulls out his blazer and burns him to ashes on the spot.
Yep.
Because he now has a piece of knowledge that's all his own.
Yeah. That was great. I like that. I like that for a couple of reasons. It seemed like very human sort of foible to one, show up in a place where you are brand new and there's a bunch of people with an established culture and understanding, and immediately assume that because you don't understand something that they're doing, that they must collectively all be wrong and you are right. Yeah, I mean, that's, the arrogance of that. And then to have it explained to you and then stick with it, just double down. It's like, oh, dude.
Yeah, I can't accept what you're telling me, so clearly you're wrong. I'm going to go to mom.
Yeah.
Or one of the unstable ones.
Yep. Yeah, I enjoyed that interlude as well. That was fun. Yeah. All right. So getting back to the first half of the book, I've been thinking about prologues a lot lately. And I'm gonna write an angry rant about prologues because I think most prologues are bullshit.
I don't disagree with you.
I think what most prologues are trying to do, they are trying to create context, and they are trying to create context for something that doesn't happen until much, much later in the book. And it's like, we don't need that context now at the beginning of the book. We need it later in the book. So this is my take on people who write prologues tell jokes like this. Hey, you want to hear a funny joke? Okay, but first I'm going to tell you this other joke, but I'm not going to give you the punchline. Yeah, that's what a prologue is. It's like the beginning of another joke, and it doesn't land for 300 pages. So don't do that. So that whole first chapter where we meet Kiri for the first time, it's like this could have been a much closer to where we meet Kiri for the second time. Because we just have this totally, and as you say, it's a completely alien species. We have to spend an entire chapter figuring out what is going on with this creature. And you talk about cerebral, it's not connected to matter at all. It's losing its memory. It doesn't know what anything is. It's so much time has passed that it's lost track of its own history. And we're just like, who is this person? How are they important? They're not. For another 150 pages.
Not for a long time yet. They're going to lay dead in a cargo hold for the next dozen chapters.
Oh my goodness. Yeah.
Yeah. This is not her finest work, but I still really enjoy this book. It has some, we've enumerated some issues that we both have with it, but I find it entertaining. It carries me through. There's no real stopping points on it.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, and this is true of all of her writing. I mean, as she goes on, as you meet new alien species or even humans in different cultures, they think and function like alien species. They think and function like humans from different cultures. They're actually different. I really appreciate that both in this book and in her other writings.
So I think we've said this before on this podcast, but I think it bears repeating. Favorites don't have to be defended. Favorites are favorites. This is not best books of yesterday. It's favorite books of yesterday.
Indeed.
So yeah. And I enjoyed the second half of this book quite a bit. The first half, not so much, but the second half, yeah, it's good. It's a rollicking story. It just moves right along. And there's a lot of big science fiction ideas in it, which I always appreciate. Yeah. So it's good. I enjoyed reading it. Glad I read it. Would have liked to have seen the first half written a little more economically, maybe. Yeah. Because I'm impatient, I guess. Yeah.
Well, I hope you give her a chance on some of her other works.
I should try one of the trilogies. Yeah.
Indeed. All right.
Yeah. All right.
Any last thoughts, or those were the last thoughts?
Those could be my last thoughts.
All right, that works for me.
Prologues, kid, don't do them.
Yeah, I'm in total agreement with you on that. And the same thing, if you're going to make a film of it, don't start the film with a scene that explains what the film's going to be about.
Yeah.
Just start the damn thing.
Yeah.
All right. So what's up next for us?
Next, we have a Connie Willis book called Passage.
Looking forward to that.
Me too.
All right. Well, we will see you all in 2 weeks.
See you in 2 weeks.